Hi, Tribe Builders. This is Tanya Rooney, and I'm really excited about my guest today. And kind of weird the way I met her. I met her via a text, and I've never actually met her in real life. She hopped on the call today, and I'm just like, oh, that's what Natalie looks like. But I started talking about some wellness stuff with a friend of mine, and she just got really excited and was like, oh my God, you need to know Natalie. So we got connected. We hopped on a call that was probably only supposed to be a half hour, and I'm sure it was an hour and a half. Like, I know it was a long time. And I'm just like, oh, I get really excited sometimes when I talk. And she's like, that's okay. So I'm excited. This is going to be a little bit different of a podcast because we're not necessarily talking about real estate and short-term rentals, but we're talking about the wellness industry. But her message is so freaking great, and it just goes right. It coincides really well with Tribe Builders. So without further ado, Natalie Jackson. Hi, how's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell my people what makes you awesome? What kind of community you got? Like what kind of business you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the owner of Natalie Jackson Wellness and essentially an online wellness business as a coaching. And I love being able to guide and facilitate a group of folks who are super interested in taking care of themselves from a holistic point of view, from looking at nature's rhythms and looking at nutrition, movement, stress management, sleep, but not when it comes to green powders and weird diets and things that are super restrictive where you can't live your life. So I kind of am at that intersection between living a life that is having your physical body feel so good and feeling comfortable in your own skin, but also living a life that feels purposeful to you, that feels like this is my jam, this is what I need to be doing. And so I am the example of that. Like I live in a off-grid tiny house for almost 10 years, and I've lived in other off-grid spaces over the years, and just want to continue to live a life that keeps me as close to nature as possible. But some of the creature comforts of modern civilization, and then use my superpowers to curate experiences and hold space for folks that feel like they just can't seem to do the things for themselves around self-care that they know they need to do. And so I create that space where they finally kind of follow through on it with a bunch of different little ways that I do that. But it's just such a fun and empowering thing to do, and have it be something that aligns with my life too.
Yeah, I love this. So you even saying this stuff reminded me of our first conversation, and I'm going to go on a small tangent because it has kind of changed a lot of the conversations between me and my husband. I got off the phone with Natalie and I was thinking about like she was talking about, and I'm really excited she's going to actually talk about that because I'll ask her some questions. But the job she used to have, she used to spend a ton of time in nature for really long periods of time with people. And then she would come home and it was like a little bit troublesome to navigate like being that version of her and then have to be the civilization. I'm going to call it civilization
Yeah.
version of Natalie. And
Country.
I, and I've thought about that so many times because I think about like the version I am when I go on vacation. Like I hike a lot. I walk to a ton of markets. Like we literally, when we go on big trips, like which we do a few times a year, we're walking, 5 to 8 miles a day, just constantly. And we just go out into nature and do all these cool things. And I've told my husband so many times that I'm like, I've actually, that conversation really did change a few things for me that I've been thinking like, well, how do I start integrating that version of me? Like, why do I have to have two versions? Why is there a vacation Tanya and a not vacation Tanya? And I want ways that I could do both. So now can you like one of the things I was so excited to learn about you was your past job. Can you kind of talk about the wilderness job that you had?
Yeah, so kind of all through it all, there was a thread of being an outdoor educator. And so that could look like leading folks on multi-day, multi-week expeditions in a wilderness setting. So what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
It could it could be basically where I'm going to be hanging out with you, where you go camping for a really long time. But I worked specifically with youth. And so in the beginning, I started to work with young boys, and we would go to the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota and go canoeing. And it was all about character development, leadership development, group dynamics. How do you camp? How do you wilderness travel, get from A to B using a paper map and a compass. And how do you cook? How do you take care of yourself when you can't just go inside and have all these modern ways in which so many things are taken care for us? And so I started in college where I did this semester long fields program that literally flipped my world upside down. I was like, wow, you can get paid to go camping? Like, this is incredible, and sign me up. I mean, there were times where I had jobs where I'd come back and I'm like, oh yeah, I get a paycheck. I would just, I would do this all the time for free. Because it was just so fun for me because it just being outside as a kid, you always have fun, but then to like keep doing that as an adult, and then to get paid for it on top, it was like, I thought I hit the jackpot, and I did. And so I kept getting more and more into the world of how to, you use the outdoors as the teacher, as the environment. And so much of what you want people to go through is just held by nature. And so you want them to go through challenging experiences and come out saying, you know what, I'm resilient. You know what, I'm not going to be put down by my failures. I'm not going to be like, wow, we did that together. I did this thing. I carried that pack over that portage. And so it kind of went from canoeing in this college experience where I was on the road for 4 months with a bunch of classmates. It was like the first time I like lived in a van and traveled 10,000 miles across the US and did my first backcountry trip in the Sierras, backpacking for a month, and was just like, wow, being dirty and just doing these really hard things physically, but then emotionally and then spiritually. I just felt like all of me got used. And you just come out being like, that was hard, but you're like smiling. And you're like, that was a close call, but holy shit, now we have a story to tell other people. And so
Yeah.
I got swept up in kind of the outdoor industry with guiding and leading these trips. And so they just kept getting longer. I went from 2 days up to 45 days, and loved flat water canoeing, whitewater canoeing in rivers in the Arctic in Canada, and then backpacking in Alaska, and started to turn into experiences and like expeditions that I did for myself, and my partner and I do long trips together. Like we've had on the Mississippi, we've bike packed across different states. And I started to recognize how wonderful it made me feel and how wonderful it was to just live that kind of life basically all of my 20s. But then there starts to come a little bit of a cost to it
Hmm.
because you're always in the back country. And so when you come back to the front country, you're like, oh, right, I have bills. Oh, right, I have to like manage, challenging relationships in my family. Oh, right, I have to go to the grocery store. Oh, right, I need to find my next job. Oh, right, and it was started, there was like this kind of like how you feel when you go on vacation. If you really, really love what you're doing on vacation, and you're just like the dread of like the end of it, and then having to go back on Monday and start again. And you're just like, oh my God, how do I do this? And even though I was having such a great time in these trips and I really loved my life outside of the trips, I just started to notice my body was starting to get really stressed out, and anxiety was going up. Depression was slipping in there a little bit. And it was just really hard for me to do that in between dance. And so, like any other person who lives a similar life to mine, you just plan the next trip while you're on the trip. So that when you get
Yeah.
off, you're like, I got the next one lined up. We're ready to go. And you just don't want that lull in between. And so, kind of what you were speaking to after we had talked is like, I started to really love what I called wilderness Natalie. I was like, wow, I love her. She's so free. She is so smart. She is like super adaptable. She just has everything dialed, from taking care of my body to managing my mental health to being an awesome leader for this group. I mean, being out with, 16, 17, and 18-year-old girls with a co-leader, and you create a family, and just feeling so steeped in life. And so I was like, how can I be her all the time? And that became a little bit of my personal mission. And then from that, Natalie Jackson Wellness kind of grew out of that, because I was kind of casually a person in a lot of my friends' life and family that people would come to me to just, get a little bit of reflective time to just kind of work out something in their life. Or I've always been kind of a holistic health um guru, if you will, of like, it just always enticed me. Like
Yeah.
I did my first cleanse when I was like 19. I was like, wow, fasting, like what is that? And just got really into it. So it started to become my mission of like, how do I become her all the time?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting to think because I know that I personally relate with a lot of that because I do have some versions of me that are a little bit different. It's like I show up a little bit different when I go to an event because I'm around so many people and my adrenaline, like I feed off of other people. I'm really extroverted, but then I come back to my normal life and I'm just kind of like a bump on a log and, just kind of hanging out. But then I keep thinking of like the wilderness version that it's like, oh, I really like hiking. I think it's so fun to explore. But when I'm in my normal life and living in, St. Paul, Minnesota, so I'm right smack dab in the city, I just don't go out and explore in the same way. So I love listening to you kind of talk about, I would think that a lot of people resonate with that because we all probably have a vacation Natalie, a vacation Tanya, a vacation
Yeah.
Matt, vacation,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. And it could
story.
be, like you said, though, it's like, I think everyone can kind of relate in some way, shape, or form. Like if you were in the Peace Corps, if you were in the military, if you had um a traumatic experience in your life. Like I'm thinking about everyone in LA with the fires right now. Like you can explain like some part of yourself to other people, but sometimes it's like you can just tell they don't get it because they didn't go through it. So
Mhm.
like some sort of informative experience that just really shaped you at that time in your life. It could be an illness. It could be a death in the family.
Mhm.
It could be, and it doesn't have to be something bad, but like kind of like good music. It all comes from like some trial and tribulation where you were down in the pits and you're just like, how do I manage this? Um,
Mhm.
and I think also too, it reveals itself to our culture of like, there has to be this time and place where it's the weekend and you're having a good time. It's like what radio stations always proclaim. It's like, all right, we're almost to Friday. And it's like, why do we push this philosophy of like, just get through the weekdays? So it's like you're having fun and you're relaxed on the weekends, but then you're like grinding on the weekdays. So it's this black and white thinking, this all or nothing, this light switches on, light switches off, where I'm just like, I want to just blur all of those lines so that the way that I'd kind of describe it is like, I want to be wilderness Natalie all the time. But also just like what's perpetuated in our culture of like, you need to be these separate selves. Cause I think there's a time and place about where you were speaking to is like, well, sometimes you just need to like recharge and be introverted. And
Mhm.
others want to be social and you want to be out and about. But like at your core, you still feel like you, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of thinking of like, yeah, you might not be able, like, I know bikers. So I think of a biker who is going to do 60 miles on a Saturday. You might not be able to do that on a Thursday, but you can still bike for an hour or two on a Thursday and you don't have to wait for the weekend or these enjoyable moments. You're right. There's a lot of enjoyable moments on the weekend and we don't necessarily think of them happening during the week, but that's not necessarily true. We just, that's kind of it's the way the culture is kind of set up and how we figure things out, and it perpetuates itself, you know, generation to generation, or how you see, like, I mean, how I see the world is that, I mean, it's changed a lot in the last few years, but it's still like my parents' lens. That's actually how I started. The lens that I started out my life with was my parents' lens of what they thought of the work week and, the different versions of yourself. And, as you get older, you start realizing, oh, I could have my own lens if I wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then it falls over into the work that I do with folks around building habits and self-care routines and looking at like mimicking what nature does. Like right now we're in winter, so it's like we need to be still, we need to be introverted, we need to be slowing down, we need to be doing less, taking things off our calendar, saying no for right now. And when you aren't doing that, you create a lot of friction, and you create a lot of our own stress. And so it's this interesting part where, like, you know, it's the same for health of like, oh, I'll start that diet on Monday, or like, oh, I'm gonna let loose on a Friday. And it's like, well, why don't you just like pick one style in which you're gonna be like your best self with your health, and just do that
Mhm.
all the time, but it adapts to various situations that you're in and who you're around, and you know what I mean? Like it should also adapt with you. And so that's what I love, like curating for folks, is like, look, you don't have to be all or nothing. And I do not want you to be like a perfect little health nut. Like, screw that, because A, that's not fun. B, it's not sustainable. And C, it's not even that healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, why not sprinkle in some fun? Why not sprinkle in real life, and then find like a style in which that fits your life, your schedule, your excitements, and your stress?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love this. So, can you talk a little bit about like you do, I don't know if it's group coaching or what it looks like, but you've talked to me a little bit about health and wellness and why it doesn't work to be alone in health and wellness. And I was very intrigued when we started talking about this. So, let's, open up that can and start talking about it, because it's, to me, it is a whole can of stuff. So tell
Yeah.
me, like, just tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating. Like most complex, uh, or what can feel like a can of worms is also really simple at its core, which is
Mhm.
we thrive best when we're together, and that's on any facet of life, anywhere you are in your wherever you are in your age or your journey in life, it doesn't matter. Like, we do better when we're all together. And there's moments where you need to like recoil and be by yourself, but ultimately it always comes back because we're social beings. It's just like ingrained in our DNA to be social, to like reflect each other, right? When somebody yawns, you probably yawn back.
Mhm.
Somebody orders a drink, you're like, yeah, I don't have another drink, or if somebody's really down in the dumps, it's just like, oh my gosh, I feel, I'm starting to feel what you feel. It's called empathy. We like to mimic each other because ultimately our survival is based on being a part of a tribe, like what you share, and like you do best when you're together. And yet our industry, so that all these companies can make more money as they tease you out to be by yourself, so that they're making more money off of you, if it's supplements, if it's surgeries, if it's all these things. And I'm very pro Western medicine and all of these things, but I think as a tool, they just get twisted a little bit too much for you to be by yourself. And so somebody's like, oh my gosh, I'm always constipated. And they're like Googling how to have better bowel movements. And you're quietly suffering because, like, it's kind of funny and giggly to talk about that. But then, like, at the same time, this person's suffering, and yet everybody else is experiencing the same thing. And so the beautiful part about, because of it seems a little counterintuitive to be like, okay, you are this outdoorsy person, and like now you're doing an online group. Like, that doesn't really make sense. And so because of our modern times that we live in, I strongly believe that you need to have an online community, and you need to have a real in-person community, like a physical community that you're a part of. Either that is like directly where you live, or you have like some sort of physical community that you're in touch with. And I think we need to have both in the 21st century. And to curate my lifestyle, I love to be able to have ways in which I can reach people consistently. And that's what the online space allows. And so I host a community of folks that are um, meet them a couple times a month, and we have live calls. I have one-on-one coaching calls that I do with them. There's a community chat where they connect, ask questions, share wins, and it just kind of keeps those touch points because, you know,
Mhm.
that's how I was trained. I was trained as a health coach, and so I have two certifications doing that, of accumulation of 3 years of essentially what I like to call my grad school, or like what I went back to school for after undergrad. And essentially a health coach came out of that need where you go to the doctor and somebody writes you up a doctor's note of like, here's your prescription, here's what you need to do, and that you don't see them for like 2 to 6 months after that. And so
Hmm.
what are you doing and then in between time? And so a coach really came from that need in the industry of someone needs to like hang out with that person so that they're being encouraged, that they're being held accountable, that if they have any last minute questions, they don't have to wait 4 more months to ask a question.
Hmm.
And so a health coach really came from that. And so I like to call myself a wellness and lifestyle coach because wellness is like the big picture of everything that's incorporated in health. And then the lifestyle piece, because if we're not integrating in it to how we're living, then it's like, well, again, we're just like putting things in little file cabinets anyway.
Hmm.
So to have that person that's there in between is just so helpful. So the online space really helps curate that, meet people where they're at in terms of schedule. We're all freaking busy. And
Hmm.
just to have these little touch points where you can have like, oh yeah, if I can't fall asleep, this is what I do. Oh yeah, if it's wintertime, here are the best foods to eat. Oh yeah, if I am at the gym and I don't know what I need to do, here's Natalie's tips of what to do. And oh yeah, if I'm super stressed out, here's what I can do sitting in my car at a red light. It's just like all these little things that you can like trickle in throughout the day that really do add up. But then I love doing in-person stuff. So I run workshops and multi-day retreats. And I love being a part of other organizations. So I get contracted out as a facilitator for other retreats. And so it's just fun to be a part of like other people's experiences, and because being a facilitator is like absolutely my bread and butter, even though I'm called a coach, but like holding space for people, allowing people to experience things on their own, but they have someone there next to them doing it with them, experiencing it with them is just so great. And so the dichotomy of like how you have group can look
Hmm.
different in different ways, but I cannot stress enough how important it is. And not only just based on personal experience, but to see, after this is my 5th year of doing this, and like to see how people experience results and how much faster they grow and get what they want when they're in a group versus when I'm coaching them one-on-one. I don't have analytics around it, but it is night and day.
Yeah, I suppose, it's kind of funny that I've been thinking about this too, and like coaching in a group versus coaching solo, and how, I'm really good at accountability. I really like that. And to hold people accountable as often as I can, but accountability groups versus accountability as a solo, it is interesting because you're talking to people maybe every week, and you have, yes, it's great to be a facilitator. It's great to be a coach, the person that's kind of in charge, but you watch the accountability that happens within a group, and people like, people care, people see you. If you talk every single week about like, you wanting to lift 140 pounds on a deadlift or something. And people like, I mean, that's the reason group fitness works, if you ask me. It's because you all of a sudden have these people around you that kind of know that you're going for a PR today, or you're getting up to this goal, and watching it happen and watching people just be there for you, letting people be there for you when you state like, this is what I want to accomplish, and then watching them watch you, or like you just get to watch it all unfold when it's a group. And it's really, really delightful because you don't have to have the answers to everything. You've got 5 different answers because you're in a group together.
Yeah, absolutely. And like having other people's experiences, like that's the part that's cool about
Yes.
my group is like I have ages ranging from 20 up to their 70s. And so
Hmm.
you have women that are like on the other side of menopause, on the other side of having they're retired or what we call full-time living. Like now they get, I have one teacher who's retired, one teacher who's like in the thick of like just really getting into her first couple of years. And so like when one is stressed out, the other one's like, girl, I see you. I
Yeah.
know it's really hard to like get up and like move your body and meditate in the morning because you feel like you don't have any time before you have 20 little ones all over you. But here's why you need to like keep working at it and making it happen. And then I'm just sitting there like,
Yay. There's also something to be said to that you're not the only one that has the same opinion. You know, like you can coach somebody and say like these are the reasons that's great, but there's something to be said when someone else, you know, in a group setting would say, "Oh, yeah, that really works for me and this is why it works for me." And then maybe another person says, "Yeah, that didn't work as well for me, but I did this to, you know, make up for it and now it does work for me." So kind of seeing like so it's not just it's kind of like your parent, like or my husband. My husband likes to tell me things, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, I kind of believe you, or I kind of don't, you know, care what you say right now on this subject. But if somebody else said it, I'd be like, oh, that's such a great idea.
It all comes down to not even like it all comes down to like when are you ready? Like when are you ready to decide that change is possible for you and that you ultimately don't have to figure it out on your own? Because that's the hardest part about moving forward in life is like we think we need to figure out the how. And most of the time we just need to figure out like when are you deciding that this is enough?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm writing
okay,
that down.
today's the day. Today is the day. I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but we're gonna get there.
Hmm.
And that's when it's like the trust and the vulnerability and the sharing, and because not everyone really digs like the group setting piece, which I totally get. Um, but that's why, you know, a group can be two people. It
Hmm.
could be three people. It doesn't have to be this massive thing where you share, you know, on a microphone what you're struggling with, and then you're like, everyone help me. It doesn't have to be that, you know, that expansive, but just so that, you know, if you can have that sense, that feeling, and really believe that you're not alone in your own struggles, that alone can just start to unravel all the change that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, obviously, I know all about this preaching. I'm like, you should go, don't do anything alone. And that doesn't mean I don't do things alone. It means, you know, the big things that you need help with, just ask. Like, it's not, I think, me and you have discussed this before, but I think the biggest thing for me is to like getting through to people that whatever you're experiencing isn't just you. And you've already talked about it a little bit. It just like if you just open your mouth, like you don't know how many people have actually already had that happen, have already had like I feel like so I talk about business a lot and accounting is a really big piece of business. And the amount of people that do not know what's going on in their books, that don't know how to do their books, that have had a bookkeeper screw up their books and they've had to redo them, it is a very high number. And I think people just feel so alone when it happens because they don't want to state, like, I'm really crappy at this portion of my business. But I don't think it's that big of a deal because you can figure it out and you especially can figure it out with other people. But if more people talked about that thing, you wouldn't
Mhm.
feel as alone, that you feel like an asshat, that you don't know what the hell is going on in your books. You can't
Yeah.
figure out how much money you make or whatever. Like that is a super common problem. Like I've cried so many times about accounting. Like anything in my business, I've only cried about accounting. And it's just because it's so stressful. But if you state those kinds of things to other people, like you find your people, whoever the heck they are, you'd be surprised at what you could get accomplished by just feeling being seen. Just having somebody be like, "Oh my God, yeah, I've had that problem too," and you can just calm down, and now you can start problem solving your way out of it and figuring out like you don't have to have it figured out. You
Yeah.
just find some people that have it figured out, and then talk about it, and then you just keep going.
Yeah, and it comes back to like such a human experience, which is just fear. Fear of whatever, like fear of like, holy fuck, I'm an adult. Why didn't I learn this yet?
Yeah, I have those moments. I'm 38 years old and I still have those moments and I'm like, how did I not know how to do this? Like, what the actual fuck?
Yeah, it's like
How is that?
certain things we have figured out, certain things you're like, did I miss that boat? Did I miss that class? Did I miss my parents talking about that? Maybe nobody just even brought it up. And so like there's shame that comes with all of these things. And there's just this like, oh, I don't, sometimes we don't even recognize it, but a lot of it I think really does come back to fear. And if I think about anything that I've ever recognized for myself of just like, oh my gosh, why does this give me anxiety? Why does this make me cry? Why does this, I mean, mine is a lot around finances too, where it's just like, I didn't really learn, like my relationship with money was super jacked up for a really long time up until like 5 years ago. And it's like, and you know, I was like, wow, if I'm going to run a business and I can't have a good relationship with money, we're going to have problems here.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, I mean, that's another thing that like whatever your lens of money comes from when you were little. Like, did your parents talk about how they couldn't afford something, that money doesn't grow on trees? Or did your parents like just say, yeah, we'll just take care of it? You know, I mean, there's different ways to go through life and everybody, I mean, however they treat it, you're still teaching somebody else about it. Like there's somebody around you that like I've become hyper focused on what other people say to themselves when they're around me. And I spent some time with a friend, you know, in December, and she talked about money. She didn't come out and talk about money and be like, hey, we don't really have very much money. She had all these tiny little things that she said, and she didn't even realize she was saying them because I ended up talking to her about it. But I noticed it by the time, like, we were together for whatever, 6 hours. Within 2.5 to 3 hours, I could count on two hands how many times she made a comment about affording something, can't afford something, that money's a little tight. Like she didn't just come out and say like we don't have very much money. It was just like all these tiny little things.
Yeah.
So I pointed it out and I was just like, do you know you have a really weird relationship with money? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you have said so many little tiny comments about money in this way. And I don't even know if you realize you're doing it, but you are, which is creating your reality around money. Like if you keep saying I can't afford something, damn right, you're right. You can never afford something, especially if you keep telling yourself you can. And it doesn't mean that you should go out and buy a brand new car if you don't have, if you're, you know, really, really, really lot of debt, but it's still like the way that we treat it. And I still like, I feel like I learned about money from my parents, and it's not the best way that I've learned about money. I learned that I was supposed to pay my bills on time every month, like that kind of stuff. But it didn't mean that there was a lot, like money didn't grow on trees in my household. So like figuring, like recognizing that kind of stuff, because we're taught things through freaking TV, through movies when we're growing up, you know, like all these tiny little things all add up. The comments our parents say, the comments of people around us, like all of this stuff, and figuring it out is such an interesting adventure because
Mhm.
you need to change the relationship. You're talking about like, you know, the business thing. It's a big difference when you're like, well, now I'm in charge of money for me, and I'm in charge of ensuring I pay these people, and in charge of, you know, making sure the government knows how much money I paid. Whether you hate the government or not, it doesn't matter. They're there. You have to pay taxes. You should pay taxes. But just like there's so many layers of all these things, and how we talk to ourselves about it is just, it's a really important layer.
100%. And I couldn't agree with you more of like, your like you it's fun to like hear you say that of just like your conversation with somebody, and because of like the work that you do and like your superpower and like what really drives you, you're like, whoa, I totally picked up on how you are. I can tell how you think about money in your head, you know,
Yeah.
and I see the same thing and hear the same thing with when it comes to someone and their health. And it usually has to do, especially with women, it's like this: if you have high self-love and you like really value yourself, you typically are able to take care of yourself because you can allow yourself to make yourself priority number one. Even if you have kids, even if you have little, if you have pets, even if you have a super busy schedule, you somehow manage to put yourself first, to tie your shoe first, to put that mask on first. And
Mhm.
so if I am listening to someone talk and they're using language like, I need to, I really need to push myself to, I've been really wanting to, I know I need to. And I'm just like, whoa. I was like, when was the last time you hugged yourself?
So you get really crunchy on them real fast.
I do.
Just
Where I'm
give
like, when was
yourself
the
a
last time
hug.
you really said I love you to yourself in the mirror? Because it does come back to that. Because if you don't prioritize you can't prioritize yourself and not love yourself at the same time. It's just not,
Mhm.
it's not how it works. Like you have to do both at the same time. And so that's why like I love thinking about like I create that bridge for people from, if I ask someone right now, like even if I asked you or any of your listeners, I'm just like, okay, what are the top 5 things you need today to feel like a badass, strong, flexible, adaptable, and super, super healthy in your body today? There, nobody would hesitate. Nobody would hesitate. Everyone's list might be a slightly different, but
Mhm.
it's all generally going to be the things we know to do.
Huh.
Go to sleep, eat well, don't be too stressed out. Like, get outside in nature a little bit, have some friend time. Like, it's like the really basic things, and yet people don't follow through. The action piece is like always in the future. Like, I'll get to it. I'm trying. I've been like, they try all these different ways of like these help books or whatever, and it's just like people can rattle it off all like I do that like little test with everybody that I work with. I'm just like, you tell me right now, what is it you need? I'm like, okay, what's actually getting in the way of you being able to follow through on that?
Mhm.
And it's
Interesting.
usually not someone else, it's not like if you start blaming people, then I know you're playing the blame game a little bit.
Mhm.
And that's it's a little different for everybody, but it ultimately comes back to you're just not prioritizing that for yourself. And yes, there might be a little bit of like an education gap of like maybe there's something you can learn, or maybe there's a different approach to doing something, but ultimately it comes back to prioritizing yourself. And so there's that component, and then I love being able to inform people about, so one of the modalities that I use is behavioral science, because yes, you can be the encouraging health coach and be like, you can do it. But it's like, motivation really isn't a, motivation is extremely fleeting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's
It's,
gonna be us.
yeah, it should not be leaned on in any way, shape, or form, especially if you're not feeling great and you're wanting like specific help with your health. Motivation is the last thing you need to be focusing on. So if like you focus on, okay, how does the brain actually operate in terms of what motivates it? When does it get rewarded? When does it like if it really wants something, how it always manages to get it? And so
Yeah.
leverage how your brain works in relationship to what you want for your health. Now you don't have to try as hard. Now you don't need as much motivation. And it is so freeing because it really opens up people to not be emotional about their choices.
Mhm.
And it really allows people to be like, oh, this
Oh.
is a formula. This is really just about leveraging the lizard brain and then lining that up with what you want. So like that's the one of the other really big pieces I help people do, because it just there's so much internal people beating themselves up of just like, you said you were gonna blah 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 and you're not doing it. And it's like,
You
hold
should. I had a coach tell me to stop shooting on myself. He told me that probably 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And I'm like, yep, I can really tell. Like I use that word a lot that I'm just like, stop shooting. Who cares what you should do? Because yeah, it's
on.
gross. Okay, can you tell me, do you have self-limiting beliefs?
Oh sure, I'm human.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that you're human. Tell me like what one or two of them are and how you've been able to get over them or how you've worked through them.
Yeah, so um one that I've known for a long time is a self-limiting belief that I believe I'm not smart.
Oh.
And yeah, and it always catches me. I haven't told that many people um in my life, but the people I have told have reacted just the same way that you did, because it's like, really?
But you probably have reactions in your life, or you have ways that you do things in life because you feel that way about yourself.
Oh yeah,
How you make
100%.
up for it.
100%. I think it's underlined so many aspects of how I've operated for so long that I'm still uncovering where it's
Mhm.
hiding. And it's fascinating too, because nobody directly ever said that to me.
Mhm.
It
They
wasn't
never
like,
do. We make something up. Like we have a
yeah,
situation when we're really little and we're just like, "Oh, I'm not smart enough to do that." Nobody has to tell you it. You told you that when your
yeah,
5-year-old self was like, "Oh, you're totally not smart enough to do this." And now that's how you've reacted and like gone through your entire life.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this stuff
One
is
of the
crazy.
first places that I did that I have been able to like track back of where it came up from myself was playing Monopoly.
Oh
think
no.
I think I was in grade school playing Monopoly with some family members or friends or something. And I just, every time I played that game, I was like, damn, I am so bad at this game. Like, I was always counting my money wrong, or I could never like, I couldn't ever really like get a leg up, or like I couldn't ever like cash in
Yeah,
on the money.
win the game.
Yeah, like I couldn't ever win a game like that. And yet I've always been extremely talented when it comes to like sports and like being how I can like move my body. And like as soon as I would like get frustrated with like a game, like a board game or card game, I'm like, screw this. And I throw everything and then I go outside, which is like what, ended up happening in my 20s. It was like, okay, college was really hard because I studied meteorology and it was like mostly calculus. And I failed a bunch of those classes and it was so hard. And yet it was so gratifying at the same time. And I think it was like after that, I was like, I need to go in the woods.
I'm gonna treat myself with 6 weeks at a time or 8 weeks at a time in the
Yeah.
woods.
So just being really kind, like the way that I've like started to turn that around and have been turning it around is like, just being able to share it with somebody else and not burst into tears because I know it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels more like this, it still has stickiness in my body, but it doesn't feel like mine anymore. But there are moments where like it can get zinged is kind of what I call it. Like if I'm in a situation with some folks and like they didn't do anything directly to me, but the environment starts to make it feel like, oh shit, I'm not smart in this situation. I'll have to like catch myself and be like, no, you are smart. You are incredibly intelligent. So I combat it with positive affirmations in the moment and as much as I can to catch myself in the moment. And to just recognize that it's words and to like tell myself over and over, like, that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting because even you saying some of that stuff, it's like there's always going to be settings where there's somebody going to be there's always going to be people smarter than you, but if you turn the table and they had to try to function in your life for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, out in the wilderness, the likelihood is they couldn't ever accomplish it either because we're all set with these specific pieces of experience that it's like just because I know a lot about real estate doesn't mean the person next to me knows anything about real estate. And that doesn't make and because but they're probably really, really good at medicine. Like anytime I go to a doctor's office, oh my God, or a hospital, I am just in such awe that there are so many human beings that are okay with being around blood, that are okay with knowing the names of some of that stuff, that know about the reactions between Tylenol versus ibuprofen versus like all these different medicines. And I'm over here like, I'm not smart in that area, but I don't mind that I'm not. So even thinking about group settings, like I've definitely had those kinds of fears that I'm just like, holy crap, I don't bring any value to this. And I'm like, just because I don't bring value here doesn't mean I don't have all of this value. That just kind of doesn't match it. So it's interesting to hear different perspectives of it though, that like
Yeah.
how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just not for the faint of heart. Life just isn't.
No, but I think that can be like the biggest thing though is I think the hard part is sometimes just even identifying the self-limiting beliefs because I know the average person is going to say like, yes, of course I have those, but to be able to really nail them down and give it words and to feel into the feelings and then to like tease that out and be like, ah, like, wow, that's not even me. That's not even mine.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Well, okay, I've got two or three more questions. So one of them is, what's the best advice someone has given you that you've used?
That I've used.
Yep, that you've actually used.
Yeah. So I think for that one, it's gonna be for my mom. So like my dad is pretty analytical, a little bit more of like information numbers guy. very realistic. And then my mom being like more this free spirit and kind of shoots from her hip a lot of times, like for anything really, like just what she does for the day, for her investments, for what she makes for dinner. She's kind of like, what's in the fridge. She's not flighty by any means. She's very, very grounded, but she has always said to me to follow my heart. And I didn't really know what that meant for a while. And she never really gave me a definition, but I've internalized it as I believe that every person is kind of brought into the world with like a set of tools, skills, talents, potentials that are all just kind of like sitting in the heart. And so I think I've kind of shifted it into taking it as an opportunity to make sure that I fully embrace my potential as a human being. Because it's not necessarily like follow your passion. She never used that word. But I think it really fell into that realm. And I've been even when I've gotten some weird looks of like my lifestyle or the work I choose to do or uh
Yeah.
how often I travel, of like people being like, are you gonna get another dog? Are you have kids? Are you gonna settle down? Are you gonna finally buy property? Are you gonna do? And I'm just like,
None of
that's
your
not
business.
what I need to be focusing on right now, because that's not what my heart is saying that I need to be focused on right now. So just really kind of trusting that inner wisdom, that inner intuition, but pairing it with reality.
Mm. That's awesome.
Pairing it with like what's actually happening in my life and in the world, so that I'm not just like trying to manifest everything. It's like, no, you still need to work hard, but like
Yeah.
we need to stay focused on what's coming up for you, because I think everyone has a different kind of list of things that are there for their potential, but it's your job to activate them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, tell me, is there what's something that you've been really lazy at in your business?
Lazy at,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, that is so, I don't use that word.
Something you just disregarded in your business then.
Yeah, disregard. I am so not a lazy person. But but I can relax. I can actively relax. Um, it's always just going to be things that scare me. It's always going to be evolve around that, so that I'm like building up the courage to get up to it. And I would say just continuing to like put myself out there with more offerings, with more in-person opportunities, with being more consistent with sharing an offering, if it's through social media, if it's through my newsletter, Tiny Tips, because it's really easy for me to like offer free advice or valuable content and things like that. But when it comes to like attaching like money to it, I often like get really small. And so
Hmm.
it's continuing to like open myself up and just say, hey, this isn't necessarily something that I'm selling. It's just a service. It's just an offering. And it's here if you want it. And if you don't want it, great. Like just being trusting that people will take and leave what they want.
Yeah.
But I continue to kind of build up that courage to keep using my voice in that way.
Uh-huh. That's awesome. I'm glad you know some stuff like that about yourself. I like that. It's been a fun new question for me to start asking because people are totally uncomfortable with it half the time.
I love I love things that are challenging and uncomfortable. So that one didn't make me uncomfortable, but it just made me realize like, whoa, I
Yeah.
don't like busy and lazy. I don't use those words for
Oh,
myself.
yeah.
Like I'm
Interesting.
full or I'm resting.
Oh, those are good. Those are good swaps, actually.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm gonna think about that further now. Okay, last question is what's one thing that you're looking for right now? Whether that be a person to help you in your business, clients to join something, whatever the heck it is, like what are you looking for?
I'm definitely looking for more people that are in a space that they're like, yeah, I'm like ready for some change in my life to make health more simple and accessible and less of like a game and less of a you need to buy all these products or you need to like invest in some crazy gym membership or anything like that. So yeah, I'm always looking for people who are in a space where it's like I would love to learn more about myself and be held in a space where I can tease out my self-care habits and I can tease out like what does it mean for me to be successful in my health and wellness, because I think it's just a little bit different for everybody based on where you're at.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so yeah, my community is open to people that are in that space, that are have that connection to nature, that are have that travel bug, and they're not always available, but they have something, they have a that's why it's nice to be online. They have that content in that library that's available to them when they want to access it, but there's also real people behind the screen.
Yeah,
um
that's great.
yeah, so people who are open and ready for that.
That's awesome. Okay, and if somebody is open and ready, how do they find you? What's the best way to get a hold of Natalie Jackson?
Yeah, so either on Instagram or my website. So everything is Natalie Jackson Wellness on Instagram, nataliejacksonwellness.com for the website. And then you'll find a direct link to connect with me to learn more about the community, or to grab some valuable content, and then also a calendar of what I have coming up in terms of in-person workshops and retreats.
That's awesome. Okay, so I am going to put that stuff in show notes. If anybody got something really, really awesome out of this, please reach out and tell us, like, shoot a message to me, shoot a message to Natalie. Like, we like hearing that this actually hit somebody in any way, shape, or form, so that we're not just talking to the ether. And then also, if you want to get connected to her to potentially check into her groups, let me know. And yeah, thanks for the time, Natalie. This was lovely. I just had so much fun the first time we ever talked. So this being the second time, I'm like, yep, this makes sense. I still love you. So thanks for spending the time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the work that you do and bringing in different types of folks and everything. Because I think, like what you said, it's all connected, but I'm just really
Mhm.
grateful to be here chatting with you as well.
Heck yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. And if you like this, please give us 5 stars, share it with somebody that you thought of, whatever you got to do to get more of this out. So thanks, guys. Bye.